Hello, Bob. How are you today?
Oh, I'm doing just fine, Mac. How are you?
Oh, good. Well, we had talked the last time that we were together that we would discuss Somalia and the drought that is affecting the people in that country, as well as
Yes,
in
I remember that.
as well as is the drought is in parts of Yemen, Ethiopia, Kenya, and the Sudan. And I'm just wondering why we have a drought there. I mean, I guess, Bob, the thing that devastates me is I was reading something about this drought, and it was telling me that it has something to do with the planting of the seeds in March, and there's not enough rain, so therefore plants won't grow. Well, we know everything on this earth needs water, right?
Yes,
So therefore, that by the time the harvest comes around, then the plant they don't have any. There's no food, and the first thing that's affected by a drought is the livestock. They go first,
yes.
and then it starts affecting the weak, the kids, and the elderly because they don't have enough food to eat. And and I look at the map, Bob. When I look at the map here, and now this is the third drought that Somalia has had in 25 years,
Oh, wow.
and and I look at the area that they are in. They're located at the Horn of Africa, which is the northeast, and right across right there on the I believe that's the Indian Ocean there, and Yemen is right across from them, and Ethiopia is to their west, and Kenya is to their southwest,
Uh-huh.
and the Sudan is west of Ethiopia. Now, when I look at the areas on the map, Bob, when they showing the drought and they're showing why this here and there, and I look at all the land throughout the northern part of Africa, right there, they all look the same to me when you look at it from the satellite photos.
Yes,
I mean the vegetation and everything looks the same as you're looking down on that land. And you look up around Egypt, you see the same thing. Then you go over to cross, I believe that's the Mediterranean there. Uh, uh, you go over there and you see the Middle East over there, right? And they look the same as the rest of the north and northeast Africa.
uh-huh.
And it just struck me, if that is so, why is there a drought just in those particular countries right there? And there's not a drought up in Egypt or over in Iraq or Iran or Saudi Arabia when they all got, or Algeria or Morocco. They all look the same, the land that, from looking down on it.
Yes.
So why should a drought just pinpoint itself right there on the Horn of Africa? So that's my question, Bob.
Wow,
And
that's a very complicated complicated scenario that you suggest, Mac. I don't have an answer for that.
well, well
What?
it may not be an answer. There is an answer though, Bob, and I'm just putting it out there. I'm just talking about it. First of all, we know that at the same time that we have there are researchers here in America who believe that the shortage of water in America is controlled by man
Oh, okay.
because of they can manipulate the clouds. And you've heard of uh, contrails, airplane contrails that when they fly over, they leave this stuff up there. You see this.
Oh, yeah. Vapor trails,
They call them contrails because they contain.
contrails.
They call them some type of chemicals. They have chemicals in them that can
Oh,
stop.
oh, you don't mean like when you're spraying for a garden or something like that.
Where it goes into the clouds and it can make those clouds disperse and not create
Oh,
any
I see
water.
what you're saying. Oh, yeah, no, I haven't looked at that, but I have seen vapor trails like you're talking about.
Right. Well, I think that they can manipulate that. And I also understand. I'm gonna have to do a little bit more research on this, but I understand that there's a satellite that can be manipulated as well. And you see,
Oh, wow.
in 2001 or 2002, the Army, I mean not the Army, but the Air Force and the Navy, they were working on something jointly that could control the weather.
Huh.
I mean, in certain areas and stuff like that. And
Yes.
I'm just thinking here, Bob, that there's got to be a reason for what is happening over there. That if someone is controlling or doing something, why would they want to do that to Ethiopia or Somalia or Kenya? What is it that what type of resources do those countries have that would make people go to such extreme to kill tens of millions of people to get?
Okay, well now that's a different question, but it's tied. I see where you're going with this. I will say this. I'm familiar. Well, first of all, if you look at the number one country that is moving in and has been for the last 10, 20 years into Africa very aggressively, is China, right?
Right.
And China is the reason they're moving into those countries is because Africa is rich. I mean, you might even say filthy rich. It's ironic. Africa is perhaps one of the, if not the, and I can't think of another of the continents that's richest continent on the planet Earth. But those countries that you cited, if you look across their geography and then look at their geology, you'll notice that they have they have a lot of minerals. I mean, diamonds and gold and stuff like that. But they have three minerals right now in them that are critical for nuclear bombs, nuclear missiles. I mean, and also for computers, and also for cell phones. And those three minerals are tantalum, niobium, and zirconium. And in Somaliland, and in Somaliland, they've got tremendous amounts of emeralds and opals. And so those are valuable minerals, particularly the first three, niobium, tantalum, and zirconium, that are very critical. And China has been extracting these minerals wholesale out of that country for the last 20 years, I guess. Because the tantalum, for example, is a metal that is highly heat resistant, so it's very good for missile use, intercontinental ballistic missiles, where it has to go out into the atmosphere and come back in at another point on the planet, and that creates a tremendous amount of heat, and it's heat resistant. Plus, it doesn't rust. It's a magnificent mineral that is used for these purposes, and so perhaps China and other countries that have the might are there to extract and exploit those minerals, and in order to do that, in order to eliminate the resistance from the millions of people who might, once they find out that there's all this wealth that's being exploited from their backyards, might be resistant. So it's easier to just let them die from starvation and a drought, where they die of thirst. Perhaps, I don't know. I mean, but that's an interesting conundrum that you suggest. I wasn't familiar with the raiding. I mean, the creation of the control of the raid, in a sense.
Well, I mean, when you think about that, that's the only area that seems to be experiencing a drought.
Right.
I mean, it has to have some implications there. The other thing is that 60 Minutes had a story. See, what they have done with the warring factors there in Somalia, they have divided Somalia into two countries now. You got Somalia and you got Somaliland.
Uh-huh.
And that's the one that the government, America, the U.S. government, they support Somaliland. And they have their own puppies there that they can control. They have the problem with the other one. Just recently, I believe he was a hedge fund manager or something. He's a multimillionaire. He's wealthy. He went over there and opened up a school. He bought land over there, spent $500,000 for the land, and he built this academy there to teach the Somalians, I don't know, the boys or girls or whatever, and to mold them to become leaders. He didn't use that word mold, but mold them. But he did say to create leaders over there.
Uh-huh.
And now that goes back to what President Obama was doing during his administration. He was putting on leadership workshops and conferences for young Africans, young leaders of Africa, throughout his administration. I do have some of those videos of that, some of those workshops that they held, where he even spoke there himself.
Yes. Uh-huh.
So there's a lot of things going on in Africa, but mainly I believe it is to, like you pointed out there, the wealth. They're going in there to take that wealth, and what is it going to leave for the indigenous people there? They're not going to have anything.
All right.
They're going to just
it's just a replay of what has happened in this country. You look at all of the gold that's been extracted from America, and look at where it came from. A lot of Indian reservations, so-called Indians, but the Native American reservations, and what have Native Americans gotten out of it for the most part? There's been a few, just like every place, everything else. A few get real fat, but most of them are real skinny. You can see the ribs in their chest.
Well, this is why I believe it's going to become imperative for blacks to young blacks to get together and get what they're going to have to come and decide what they want. They're going to have to pick out a nation in Africa that they can work with, and maybe even go there, and move there or whatever, but they can be dual citizens or whatever. But they're gonna. I believe. I'm reason I say they is because it's going to be years down the road, which we probably won't be here. More.
Yes, right. Right.
So, but that's what they got to start working on right now. They got to work on coming together with picking a nation over in Africa, not to get a foothold there, so they can work with the people there and take some of their resources from this country and be able to help those countries over there. Now, many African countries are doing quite well. I've been doing some research on that, and hey, they got some heck of some economies over there. It's just that I think that we as black Americans, we just don't understand Africa, whereas other people do. And there's so much corruption over there as well, as you may be aware of. But somehow or another, blacks in this country are gonna have to start forming a firm alliance with a country in Africa. And I'm not talking about. I'm talking about a strong country over there, and be able to, and the expatriates, Africans that's over here. I mean, they're gonna have to do the same thing.
Yes.
But if they want to live up to Nkrumah's words, that of Ghana back in the 60s, he made this early 60s, he made the statement that Africa will rule the world not by power, but by force of character. But we know that whoever has the most money has the power, right, Bob?
Oh, sure.
So if they could control, back then he didn't understand how much wealth they probably really had, because they thought that when the owners of the mines down in South Africa had gotten, that was all the gold and diamond that was there,
Yeah.
But in the bush there's much gold there in the bush of Africa.
Oh yeah. I think on a scale of 1 to 10, if you're comparing exploitation of the mineral wealth of Africa, even over all these years, going all the way back to Cecil Rhodes, I think that probably on a scale of 1 to 10, there's probably been only about 10% of the wealth has been exploited, less than 10%.
That's right. So that's one of the things that that's why I say that today, with all the technology and everything else that's out there, I mean, we've talked about it in the past that many blacks are not welcome throughout the world,
Right.
And I don't care how you try to cut it. And it's not time to go around and try to be liked by somebody else, another race of people, You got to start creating for yourself. You can't do like they continue to do in the United States. They continue to march. Every time somebody get hurt, they march. Or they take them to court, or they go out for the handouts. I heard one gentleman today say on the radio that it's their money that they're asking the government for, because because we, the way he used the word, are paying 35 to 37% of our earnings in taxes. Bob, I don't know anybody that's paid 35, 37% unless you're making a lot more money than I've ever seen. You know what I mean? Because the average Joe out there is not paying that much money in taxes. I mean, I mean, I guess if you aggregate it up, if you're in a state with like California where you got a 12% tax bracket, uh, then maybe you are paying a pretty high when you aggregate all of your state, federal, and city taxes.
Right.
But I think that what blacks have to do, they got to come together and do something economically. As I stated earlier, money is power. Wealth is power. So if you think that going on a job and making whatever amount of money you're making, a 6-figure income, if you think that's wealth, and then you go out there and buy you a big SUV, you got a big house, and all of that, and you think that's wealth, that could be gone tomorrow, Bob.
Oh, absolutely.
So but you gotta go out there and start investing your money into things that's gonna create even more wealth. That's gonna make money for you while you are sleeping. Now that's when you become wealthy. What they call passive income. And we've got to begin to realize that. And not only having that passive income, but we got to have businesses, brick and mortar businesses. We got to have all types of businesses in our community where we can sustain a community. Because, as somebody said, blacks really don't have a community anymore. We have a neighborhood.
And I remember where I saw this now. They've been running an ad on PBS, and I forget under whose auspices it's being run, but I think it hits right to the point of what you're talking about. They said for every dollar of wealth that the average white, and these are almost verbatim terms, that the average white family has, the average black family has 5 cents. And I heard this like this week, just within the last few days. And I forget who's running these ads, but when I first saw that, I said, "Oh, that's got to be incorrect." I mean, I got a nickel for every dollar that my white counterpart has. But when you look at that, and I've seen it run, and next time I see it, I'm going to write down under whose auspices it's being promulgated. But I thought, wow, they're just openly blatant about those kind of statistics today. And you don't hear anybody talking about that. That's an astounding revelation.
Well, repeat that, Bob.
For every dollar of wealth that the average white family has, the average black family has 5 cents. A nickel. Wasn't that for every white woman?
No,
this said family. That's what struck me.
Oh, really?
And it showed the picture. They had an image of a black man and his wife.
Man, that is really devastating, Bob, to hear that type of news. But it's got to be true, and your average black out there, they don't think about wealth in the terms of generational wealth.
Right.
If you talk to someone about investing money for the future of their grandkids, they look at you like you're crazy. But when you see stories about certain wealthy families out there that has old money, and I recall one particular story. It was on 60 Minutes, I believe it was, Johnson and Johnson family, or some family like that. This guy had done a documentary, and he said that every year we go to this meeting with our financial advisor, and he tells us the same thing. He said, well, you're getting richer. Because, I mean, how much money can you spend, Bob? If you out there, if you got $100 million and you got it invested in dividend stocks and whatever, and you get this passive income coming in every quarter, in some cases monthly. I mean, how much if you got $100 million coming in every month, how much can you spend?
Right.
I mean, unless you just a nutcase, you know, got to be flamboyant for all of your friends and everybody else. So it's going to accumulate, right?
Absolutely.
And so that's why it gets, you got more than you had last year.
But see, going back to the point that we were talking about earlier about all of the mineral wealth, and we're talking in that instance in Africa, trillions of dollars.
Right.
And most people, I think I would venture to say this, that if you started talking about, I bet you 90% of the people back do not even know what a $1 billion is, first of all, and they don't know they sure as hell wouldn't know what $1 trillion is. And so when you talk about those kind of numbers, it causes people's eyes to glaze over.
Well, you know what the average person out there think about, and especially in our community, Bob, when you talk about investment, they talk about buying a CD.
Yeah.
What kind of return you get back from a CD? That's just a few decimal, a few points more than having a 0.001% bank account, right?
Right.
So I tell you, there has to be a lot of education if the people want it. You know, it's there for them, and I just pray that somehow or another that they begin to open up their eyes, especially many of these college grads that we have now coming out, and these because we got a lot of smart people in our race, Bob, some brilliant people, really. And if they could only awaken to come together, if they don't see what's happening, they're being scattered. They're being scattered out into all the affluent areas of this country. And they have no voice out there. Because strength is in numbers, Bob. Strength in unity, in numbers. If you don't have any numbers, you just lost.
That's right.
It's just like I saw this morning on a show. I think it was Good Morning America or something, where they had a hazing situation at Penn State, I believe it was, and one boy they had him to drink a lot of liquor. And he died. And I mean, first he fell down these steps. And one kid told him, and it was a black kid, he said, well, don't you think we should call the ambulance? And all the other ones said, oh, no, we're not going to call the ambulance. He'll come back around. They poured water on him, did everything. But they saw that he had fallen and had hit his head. And that kid died the next day,
Oh, wow.
But, but they asked, the anchor person asked the black kid, said, well, why didn't you take it upon yourself to call the doctor? He said, I tried, but they told me, they just pushed me up against the wall and said, no, this happens. He'll be all right,
Uh-huh.
But I tried to kept trying to get them to do something. But I mean, I don't know. I didn't hear all of what he said to her because they cut it off. If he, but he had no voice, Bob. Nobody else got on his side. So what are he gonna do, right? But he could have done something. He could have left there.
Right.
I mean, in my opinion, if he thought it was that serious. But he was the only
Sure.
one. He's the only one they didn't charge with manslaughter or some.
Oh wow. Because he had some sensitivity for life.
Yeah.
Right.
But that's the way many of our people will be, Bob. To be pushed out. You won't have any more communities.
Right.
You'll be out there in the wilderness by yourself.
Yeah. Yeah, that's not a pretty picture you paint back.
But it might be a good picture. I talked to some people. They say, "Hey, that's where I want to be," because they are tired of all of the crazy things that happen around them.
Oh, sure.
But
Yeah, it's well, I'll tell you what. I'll say this to you because I know that and you're almost making a convert out of me, but you're the eternal optimist, brother. And I think that that's a good way to be. I've been thinking about some of the things that you said in the past, and your optimism. It's I think it's contagious because I'm beginning to become a little bit more optimistic too. I think that we are going to wake up. We're either going to have to wake up, or we're going to end up just completely exterminated as a race of people. And I don't think that's going to happen. I think that before that does happen, we'll begin. And there, I can see some brightness. Like you talking several conversations ago, you were saying that that light at the end of that tunnel. How you saw the goodness in it, and I was saying I saw it as a train coming. I got
right.
to thinking about it, and I got to looking at some of the young people that I have been watching. You're right. We got a lot of strength out here, just like that young man that you just cited. I don't know him. I didn't see the interview, but he was doing the right thing because it was right to do it. And there's probably thousands of young men like him who are out here trying to do the right thing. And he was highlighted because of a tragedy. And there's probably a lot of young men like him that are out here doing the right thing, but they're not being highlighted because there's no fanfare when you do the right thing.
That's right.
So I think that you hit on something right, but we got it. If we don't do something, I think it was Dr. Claude Anderson. He said this, and I was amazed that he made this observation probably 5 or 6 years ago. He told us if you don't do something about putting together the economics in your own community, you're going to be useless. You're going to be out of the picture in a sense. And I think we've reached that, but there's still a residual group of us who, will perhaps we can pull the others that are trying to drown themselves. Maybe we'll be able to find some life jackets for them.
Oh yeah, well that's true. Well, we just have to, like you said, Bob, stay optimistic and stay focused here on the good things in life. I understand that you getting ready to fly out to Colorado for a few weeks.